More and more over the last couple of seasons, fantasy owners have decided that they want to draft wide receivers early and often. And I'm not saying that's a good strategy, and I'm not saying that's a bad strategy. That's just a discussion for a different video. But what I want to make sure you know is that if you want to go with wide receiver early, how risky are those picks going to be? How do you balance the upside with the floor? Today, we're talking about the riskiest wide receivers from last season and how it translates to 2024. Yo, what's going on, Headliner Nation? In today's video, I am taking the top wide receivers in terms of their current 2024 ADP, dissecting their 2023 numbers, giving them a risk score, seeing who is the riskiest wide receiver from last season, and how that may change with their new environment in 2024. And I've already done quarterbacks and running backs in this video series, so when this video is done, make sure you check those out. And this is the type of information that you can use regardless of what type of league you play in. Redraft, Dynasty, Best Ball. And if you're thinking about jumping in some best ball leagues, then you need to take advantage of using our code over on Underdog right now, because you're going to get a ton of free perks. All you got to do is head on over to Underdog and sign up using code word headliners for a new account and deposit at least $10. Number one, you're going to get an exclusive pick'em just for using our code that's almost guaranteed to hit. Number two, you're also going to get a deposit bonus. And number three, you're going to get our 2024 fantasy football draft guide for absolutely free. This has got to be the best time to sign up. Not only are you going to get all of that stuff for free, but with the MLB All-Star Game Home Run Derby coming up on the 15th, Underdog is running a special promotion where if you pick Gunnar Henderson, you're going to get his line at over 0.5 home runs. Gunnar Henderson has 27 home runs right now. Do we not think that he's gonna have at least one in the home run derby? Oh man, that is a free ticket right there, especially when you double up with our promotional ticket that you'll receive for signing up. But now we're gonna jump into all of the content and quick explanation on how this video works. For us to find risk score, I took the top wide receivers based on their 2024 ADP. Then I went back and I took a look at all of their game logs from 2023. And I assigned points based on where they finished among wide receivers every single week. For example, for every game a wide receiver finished inside the top 12 wide receivers, they get 1 point. For every game they finished from 13 to 24 among wide receivers, they get 2 points. For as many games as they finish anywhere from 25 to 36, that's 3 points. And then for every game they finish outside the top 36 wide receivers, they got 5 points. We add all those points together, we divide it by the amount of games they played last season. The lower the score, the less risky that wide receiver was. And to start, let's take a look at which wide receivers led the league in wide receiver one performances last year. Top 12 games, Tyreek Hill, 9 games, led the league last season, 2 more than the next closest person. And Tyreek Hill probably has the highest ceiling of any wide receiver in football. Drafting him at the very top of your draft is not a shock to me, and likely he's going to be a top 3 pick again this season. But then Amon-Ra, CeeDee Lamb, and Puka Nacua all tied for 7 wide receiver 1 games. If I had to guess, Puka Nacua would be the one that would be least likely to replicate those numbers. And that's just based on the fact that as of right now, Cooper Kupp is healthy. Now, if Cooper Kupp misses time, that obviously would thrust Puka Nacua back up into a larger volume role. But to start 2024, we may see some inconsistent performances if Cooper Kupp is getting way more targets than what he was at certain points last season. Justin Jefferson may have only played in 9 games last season, but he was still a wide receiver 1 5 times. That's more than he finished outside the top 12. That's kind of a crazy statistic. And how about Garrett Wilson being drafted as a top 10 wide receiver this season and didn't even give you 1 top 12 performance last year? Now, clearly his situation is much different this year. Aaron Rodgers should be back and healthy. But just keep that in mind. Aaron Rodgers, if he were to miss any time, Garrett Wilson was not able to finish inside the top 12 one time last season with a backup quarterback. We'll see if the New York Jets can handle any type of adversity if Aaron Rodgers misses any time again this season. But it's going to be reliant on the health of a quarterback coming off an Achilles tear that's on the wrong side of 40. And maybe he didn't have any wide receiver 1 performances, but he tied with Michael Pittman last year with 7 wide receiver 2 performances. Which is kind of odd how people are looking at Garrett Wilson and being like, hey, this guy has all the upside in the world this year. Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, top 12 wide receiver. But we don't look at Michael Pittman the same. And I'm not saying that Michael Pittman and Garrett Wilson belong in the same tier. I'm just saying that Michael Pittman deserves a little bit more respect. And I think people are actually knocking him because of Anthony Richardson, instead of looking at the fact that Anthony Richardson may help unlock a little bit more of his upside this season that we didn't see last year. At worst with Michael Pittman, though, if you draft him as a wide receiver 2, that's the number that you're going to see on your scoreboard a majority of the weeks. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 6 wide receiver 2 performances last season, which means in 15 games last year, there was only 2 games where he finished outside the top 24 wide receivers. And another one of the reasons why I continue to pound the drum and say Amon-Ra St. Brown is the safest wide receiver that you can draft in all of fantasy football. If you want to say Tyreek Hill has more upside, that's fine. I don't argue that. If you want to say CeeDee Lamb has more upside, that's fine. I won't argue that. But neither of them are as safe as what my boy Amon-Ra is. Because Tyreek Hill only had 11 games inside the top 24 wide receivers. Amon-Ra had more. CeeDee Lamb also had 13 games inside the top 24 wide receivers, but he also played in 1 more game than Amon-Ra St. Brown did, so that means he had 1 more game outside the top 24 than what Amon-Ra St. Brown did. Davante Adams finished 2023 with 6 games as a wide receiver 3. Which means you're drafting Davante Adams right now at his ADP to be a high-end wide receiver 2. And at best last season, you were getting wide receiver 3 performances a majority of the time. Because he did have 5 games as a top 12 wide receiver, but he didn't finish as a wide receiver 2 at all last season, and he had 6 games as a wide receiver 3. And I'm not inherently sold on the fact that Gardner Minshew is just going to be a huge upgrade over what they had at the wide receiver position last season. I mean, look at Michael Pittman Jr. Gardner Minshew was his quarterback last season, and he was at best a wide receiver 2 a majority of the year. Unfortunately, that's probably what we're getting from Davante Adams this year. Now, I would like to see guys like Zay Flowers and Chris Olave take some of these wide receiver 3 games from last year and make them wide receiver 2 games. Both of these guys should be the wide receiver 1 on their respective team this year, and hopefully see a little bit more consistent volume and playmaking. So some of these games where they just weren't that great in our lineup, they take and bump up a little bit so they give us a little bit of a safer floor. All right, now the league leaders in games finished outside the top 36 wide receivers. And as we kind of talk about a few of these guys at the very top, some of these situations are a lot better. Drake London with 9 games last season. He has Kirk Cousins and a different offensive philosophy now. I expect those numbers to get better. Jamar Chase, he had Joe Burrow with injury issues last year. As long as Joe Burrow can stay healthy and that wrist doesn't cause too many problems, we should see Jamar Chase take that 7 and bump it up to the wide receiver 3 and wide receiver 2 numbers more often. DJ Moore, maybe a little bit more consistent production this season. Last year, he either had some high highs or he had some low lows. Caleb Williams may be able to help him stay right in the middle a little bit more often, even if we do sacrifice some of that ceiling because there's more weapons around him. But then that brings me to a guy like Devontae Smith, whose situation this season isn't changing. Same coach, same offensive philosophy, same competition for targets, same quarterback. Devontae Smith is this guy. He's going to give you some big games because he is a big playmaker on the outside and he can just torch defenses at will. but he's going to have a tough time staying consistent for you. I feel like a lot of people keep drafting Devontae Smith hoping he becomes a wide receiver 1, and unfortunately, he's going to be the type of receiver that is going to be better suited for best ball, because when you get his big weeks, that's awesome. They're going to help you win. But when you get his bad weeks, you're going to want to be able to replace that number, because in redraft leagues, that bad week could lose your week for you. And I already mentioned Amon-Ra St. Brown, and he's going to be mentioned again very soon. Only one game outside the top 36 last year. And because a lot of leagues have moved to starting 3 wide receivers or starting multiple flex positions, as long as you finish as a top 36 wide receiver in a 10 or 12-man league, there should be a spot for you in a starting lineup. Amon-Ra St. Brown shows once again that every time except for one time last year that he went into your lineup, he gave you fantasy startable numbers. All right, let's look at the final risk score now, and keep in mind the lower the score, the better. So the A-tier players here, no shock that Justin Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown are at the very top. And if you're spending a bunch of draft picks on guys like Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, and Jamar Chase over Amon-Ra St. Brown, I beg you to please reconsider just automatically saying no to Amon-Ra St. Brown as your wide receiver 1 in the first round. Because for as good as Justin Jefferson is, Amon-Ra, who played in more games last season, only finished 0.03 fantasy points behind him for the best risk score here. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I'll say it again, is one of the safest wide receivers that you can draft in all of fantasy football. And guys like Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, CeeDee Lamb, these guys are going to be in very similar situations once again in 2024 and should give you some pretty good consistent production throughout. But then we see a guy like AJ Brown and Deebo Samuel, and you probably are wondering right now, how did these guys make it into the A tier? AJ Brown was really good all season long. It was just the collapse at the end of the season by the Philadelphia Eagles that ended up hurting his numbers. And recency bias, that you remember AJ Brown struggling so much at the end of the season that you forget how good he was the rest of the year. But there's a reason his score is in the A tier, and Devontae Smith isn't going to hear his name for a little bit longer. Invest in AJ Brown whenever possible. And we're actually going to talk about Deebo Samuel and the start of the B tier together, because teammate Brandon Ayuk finished right behind him. Deebo Samuel gave us a 2.57, Brandon Ayuk a 2.6, which, if you're keeping track at home, these guys really are kind of on the same play when it comes to their risk score. Now, that's just the way this offense is in San Francisco for the pass catchers. Christian McCaffrey is going to get his on the ground for sure, and he's going to get worked into the passing game a little bit. But in any given week, it could be George Kittle, it could be Deebo, or it could be Brandon Ayuk. But to see Deebo Samuel up this high, really at this point, is not that bad of a thing. His ADP right now comes in at 21.4. A few spots behind Brandon Ayuk at 18. The biggest issue that we've had with Deebo Samuel is the fact that he just gets banged up and he misses some time. And because of that, he seems a little bit riskier than what he is. But all football players get banged up, and unfortunately, injuries are part of the game and guys miss time. So if we're drafting and looking at putting together the best team possible, if you're looking at drafting Deebo Samuel, I don't want him as my wide receiver 1. And I don't really want Brandon Ayuk as my wide receiver 1 either. I would want both of these as my wide receiver 2, because there's going to be some risk with both of them. Most likely, if they're playing, you're going to get a solid floor every single week. And Deebo's floor may be a little bit better than Brandon Ayuk's, but Brandon Ayuk will definitely have more upside. DK Metcalf actually scoring better than Puka Nacua was an absolute insane stat that I was not anticipating on seeing when I put the final numbers together. That mainly has to do with the fact that DK Metcalf only had 2 games outside the top 36 wide receivers last season. Yeah, he was not great. He didn't offer you a high ceiling, and it was not the DK Metcalf type numbers that we've been used to in the past. But Puka Nacua finished outside the top 36 5 times. And because of that, his score just ended up being a little bit worse than DK Metcalf. But that doesn't mean that Puka Nacua doesn't have a higher upside than what DK Metcalf does. Remember, this is all about trying to find how large that variance is in scoring. Who are the guys that are going to score more consistently for you compared to the guys that are going to score really high sometimes and really low other times? Michael Pittman and Chris Olave being right in this area also is not that big of a shock. Not a ton of high performance games last season. They finished right in the middle quite a bit with some lower tier numbers than what we would like. But once again, that's why last year when we looked at them, they offered us an okay floor every single week, but they just weren't able to reach that ceiling. Now this year, that could end up changing. I do believe the changes in Indianapolis, getting Anthony Richardson back, adding Adonai Mitchell to the outside, things like that, Jonathan Taylor being fully healthy, things like that will help Michael Pittman Jr.'s ceiling get a little bit better and maybe increase this score a little bit. When we take a look at a guy like Chris Olave, honestly, they just need to change the way that they use him. Last year's utilization of just sitting him on go routes down the field is not the type of wide receiver he is. Really, they need to look at the way the Dallas Cowboys utilize CeeDee Lamb and put Chris Olave in the same type of structure. Two teammates now kick off our third tier together, Nico Collins and Stefon Diggs. Nico Collins, this is no shock to me. And if it is to you, it's because you've only been looking at like where he finished last season and not how he finished there. And it's going to be potentially worse this season for him. Nico Collins is going to be the big play guy for the Houston Texans. He is going to have some massive games this year. But if you think he's going to be consistent, you're absolutely kidding yourself. Stefon Diggs, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz running the ball with Joe Mixon absolutely are going to continue to keep Nico Collins and really Stefon Diggs as well right in this risk area. And even just a few spots lower in the same area is Tank Dell. That's what you're getting when you invest in the offense for the Houston Texans this year. The Houston Texans are going to be good. CJ Stroud is a top 5 potential quarterback. Joe Mixon is a running back 2 at the least this season with some low-end RB1 upside any single week. But the wide receivers in Dalton Schultz are going to have some wide variance of finishes, and if you're drafting them in redraft leagues, that's going to leave you in a little bit of a pickle every once in a while because these guys are going to put together numbers that absolutely will tank your weeks. Devontae Adams, again, a lot of people talking about Gardner Minshew potentially being his new quarterback this season. Number one, Gardner Minshew is not the starter right now. Aiden O'Connell and him are expected to compete in training camp, and neither one has really been looked at as the odds-on favorite yet at this point. Gardner Minshew didn't even give Michael Pittman that high of a ceiling last year. And do we look at the Las Vegas Raiders offense and really think that the players they have this year are better than what the Indianapolis Colts had at times last season? I would say no. Devontae Adams, to me, is not worthy of a wide receiver 1 type pick. If you want to look at him as more of a wide receiver 2, I'm okay with that. His ceiling is not going to be that great. And once again, there will be weeks that absolutely suck for you. I do hope Zay Flowers finds a little bit more consistency this season as well. That rookie year had some up and downs for him. And this is an offense that could get back to running the football with a little bit more authority now that they have Derrick Henry. But that doesn't mean that Zay Flowers couldn't experience some more efficiency this season, given the fact that defenses are going to be paying so much attention to Derrick Henry. That, coupled with a healthy Mark Andrews, fingers crossed, coupled with a potential breakout Rashad Bateman, could lead to a little bit less volume for Zay Flowers, but some more one-on-one matchups and more upside, helping this score get a little bit higher. And DJ Moore finishing this low, not really a shock either. He had some really good games last season, and he had some games where he absolutely disappeared. We talked about that a couple of minutes ago. And this year, with the added weapons around him, it's not going to make things a whole lot easier. But my hope is that with a little bit of an enhanced passing attack with Caleb Williams, that even if his volume comes down, meaning that his ceiling could end up falling a little bit because he's not getting as many targets, that floor that we saw last season, that comes up a little bit. Because if that comes up a little bit, even if the ceiling shrinks a little bit, we find DJ Moore with more finishes in the middle instead of a bunch at the top and a bunch at the bottom. Devontae Smith, I've already given you my concerns on Devontae Smith. In no way, shape, or form will you ever find me drafting Devontae Smith in a redraft league. That is just not the type of player for that type of environment. You want Devontae Smith? add him to your best ball rosters. Jalen Waddle really just needs to stay healthy this season. I do think you're going to see some risky games from him because Tyreek Hill is the #1 offensive weapon in that system. And then you've got a little bit of help coming behind you this year with Odell Beckham Jr. and Jonnu Smith at the tight end position. And of course, Miami, they ran the football very well last year. Jalen Waddle is going to continue to have some good games, but that wide receiver 1 upside that we used to look for from him, I don't think it's there anymore. I view him more as a high upside wide receiver 2, and hopefully this year that floor just comes up a little bit to meet that in the middle. Jamar Chase, his score is so bad because of Joe Burrow being hurt last year. This score will absolutely get better if Joe Burrow's wrist is not a concern and he stays healthy. Garrett Wilson, this score should get better no matter what. Even if Aaron Rodgers only gives us 10 games next season, and let's say he's only the 15th best quarterback in the NFL, he's still 10 times better than what they had last season. Garrett Wilson getting a lot safer floor this year is almost a guarantee at this point. And then guys like Cooper Kupp and Drake London to finish off the list here. Cooper Kupp, it's all about health with him. Yeah, he might be a little bit more risky now, not only because of the health, but because of Puka Nacua. But then a guy like Drake London, when you look at him, he should get a lot safer this season. His issues last season completely tied to the fact that they just did not have a great passing attack, and Arthur Smith, from a play calling standpoint, was really, really bad. Kirk Cousins in a better offensive scheme should help Drake London be a lot better. Even if he doesn't reach the wide receiver 1 potential that a lot of people want, heck, give me wide receiver 2 numbers from him and I'll be just as happy. Well, Headliner Nation, there you have it. Breaking down the riskiest wide receivers from last season and what their outlook for 2024 is. Hopefully you enjoy this content. I know I enjoy putting it together. This is one of my most popular series that I do every offseason. And if you appreciate it, hit the like button for me. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing. Turn on those bell notifications as well. Anytime we drop new content or go live, you'll get that notification right to your phone. And also make sure you check out my last videos that I did about the riskiest players at running back and quarterback. YouTube is going to recommend one of those videos to you right now. Click on it as soon as this is done. Headliner Nation, peace out, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.